I hope you guys are ready for this. I'm going to put you on some game today. These are the types of podcast funnels that we're seeing that is being successfully deployed in the marketplace today for high ticket call funnels, video sales letter funnels. And if you're looking to scale your business to 8 figures and you know that you need more earned media out there to support your funnel, this video is going to be a great viewing one for you. I'm going to break down all the best bits of from the top of the funnel to the bottom, what funnels are working the best today, the way you want to think about deploying this media to get you the best results, and also like why it's incredibly important to think of this as a contributor to your paid campaigns and not a replacement for your paid media. Now, if you're new to the channel, all we talk about here is either getting to 100K months or adding multiple 6 figures onto the back end. We don't do any income promises or earnings here. Quick disclaimer, everything you're seeing here is just for educational purposes. These are lessons that we're learning, working with high-level businesses in the podcasting field. We got no idea who you are watching this video, so I don't know if we can get you a result or not. And so for that reason, just bear that in mind and excited to dive into this video today. If you are a returning subscriber, welcome back, and I think you're going to enjoy what we're going to go through today. Now, one of the biggest questions that we get all the time is, well, what's working today in podcasting? And actually, a lot of stuff has shifted in the recent months. One of the things that you've probably noticed if you've been using paid advertising, if you're doing a couple of 100K a month already in your business, or even if you're just trying to get to that 100K a month break point, one of the things that people are noticing is that after the Facebook ads Andromeda update, ad costs are rising, ads are getting a little bit more challenging to deploy. You need a lot more content, a lot more media out there. And generally speaking, people have been turning to other forms of media to support their paid advertising efforts. And we've seen this across multiple different business owners. We've got a lot more businesses between 1 to 10 million a year who are coming to us now, basically trying to get more bang for their buck in their marketing, more return on ad spend, and ultimately trying to scale to that 8-figure level and beyond. And we're going to break it into these 4 sections. First being earned media. We're going to talk about the ways in which you want to deploy earned media and how you really want to think about this, from podcast guesting to just putting out your own episodes or your own YouTube episodes. It's really important for you guys to understand the purpose of media as it relates to the funnel that we're going to be deploying. The second thing we're going to cover is actually the podcast funnel, what's working today, why you guys can expect the best results if you do it the right way, and why you're probably missing out on shed loads of cash if you're doing it the wrong way. The third thing we're going to talk about is really just understanding the goal of this podcast content. Like, why are we doing it in the first place? What is the point of getting booked on podcasts? What is the point in deploying these systems? Just so you can understand the ecosystem a bit better. And finally, we'll talk about some long-term goals. So let's start breaking this down because I think it's going to be really interesting for you. Now let's talk about earned media. Now, when we talk about earned media, this is just anything that is not, in our opinion, leveraged. This is something that you earn with your time, not with your dollars. So paid advertising, cold outbound would be paid media, and podcast appearances, content that you put out, that's what we consider to be earned media. And the first thing that I really want to help you guys understand is that as a company with Media Firestorm, we specifically help our clients get booked on podcasts, get exposure in front of other people's channels. But it isn't because we think it's better to be on other shows. It's just usually the most leveraged use of your time. Think about it this way. If you're going to sit down and do 60 minutes of content and you're going to do it just on your own channel, you're only getting the reach of your own show. You're not getting on other people's websites. You're not getting other people's credibility in there. So what we're able to do is actually create a content production machine where you're also getting exposure to other people's sites. And today, I'm going to share a little bit later in section 3 of how this massively benefits you when it comes to AI, language learning models, ChatGPT, search results, because this is a huge component of the funnel. But to begin with, let's just talk about podcast appearances and what you want to do. So the first thing that you want to really think about here is that if you're going to have a podcast guesting funnel, you need to be booking shows. And there's a lot of ways that people do this. They cold pitch shows, they reach out to people, they get invitations from friends. There's a ton of different ways. One of the things that I want to cover here is just pitching in terms of how you're going to get on these shows and why it makes sense to have a strong pitch offer, and also the power of connection and actually being part of a larger network. So first things first, when you're pitching shows, remember that everybody else and their mother is using AI to pitch nowadays, and your average chance of getting booked on a podcast, if you do like an outright cold pitch, is 1 in 400. And so every one of these cold pitches that people send out to podcasts, they do it all in the same way. They send some kind of email, they attach their pitch deck or their one-pager, and they just hope that they're going to get a good result. What I want you to recognize is that podcasters, they see this a mile off. This is kind of like when somebody gives in a resume to come and work at a company, right? What happens if somebody walks into your business and says,
Hey, I'm looking for a job. Can I give you my resume?
that resume immediately gets tagged, thrown straight in the bin because this person hasn't put any additional effort in. They're just handing this out to as many people as possible. And that's what people look at when they see a one-pager. Podcasters see that and they immediately just discard the email and they're like, oh, here's another podcast pitch where someone's just sending me a generic thing. And so whenever we're doing pitches to shows, one of the things that I think is really important for you guys to understand is that you want to do like a cover letter. If you're applying to a job and you're trying to get into the front door, you're not going to do it the traditional way. You're a business owner. You're going to think outside the box. You're going to do something random. You're going to send, the marketing manager some kind of random lumpy mail. You're going to write a cover letter. You're going to talk about these different areas. Maybe you're going to deliver value ahead of time. That's the way you want to think about it with these pitches inside of this process. So the first thing is pitching is not a very effective way to do this. You don't want to be like everybody else. The second thing is I want you to understand that when you're pitching these podcasters to actually get onto their shows, you want to think about the offer. Now, podcasters, they come in three categories. They're either a small enough show that they're just looking for guests, they're a bigger show, which means they're looking for exposure, or they're a giant established show and they're looking to get paid. And they only fall under these three categories. And so one of the things that we do inside of Media Firestorm is that we have a really big network effect. We've got 75,000 podcast professionals, CEOs, founders that are inside of our network. And so we get podcasters that come to our brand all the time because they're looking for one of these three things. They've either got a giant show and they're looking for customers who are willing to pay dollars to get onto that show. They're either an already established podcaster and they want somebody who's going to help them to grow the show by promoting it or getting exposure, or they're a beginner person and they just want high quality guests and they don't want to have to filter through and they're there to save time. And so it's really important to understand that when you're pitching these individuals, you have to pitch the offer based on where they're at inside of this process. Now, inside of Media Firestorm, we do this for you. We have this huge network. We've got 400 plus high-level clients. And so when a podcaster comes into our network, we've got certain clients that have got 500,000 people on their email list, 150,000 people on their email list. And so they want to join the Media Firestorm network with needaguest.com because they know I'm going to get a high quality 7 or 8 figure business owner, or even if they're a smaller level business owner, I'm going to get somebody else that's going to be great later. They're going to have an audience. They're going to know how to give a great show. They're going to give me great content, and they're going to promote me, and they're going to help me get more exposure. And so one of the big things that we always say here is that the booking and the pitching to get onto shows is something that should be almost automatic inside of your business. And this is one of the primary things that we take care of. If you're curious about our Media Firestorm process or how it works or how we've built this inbound network to make booking really easy, feel free to click down the link in the description. You can find out more about how that process. But the first thing you need if you're going to go get onto shows is you need to have a system for getting booked. Now, all the examples of how we do the pitches, the database, the relationships that we've built with these podcasters, and everything about how we can help you to make the right pitch offer, the right show pitch, and also just introducing you to top clients. That's all available when you become a client inside of Media Firestorm. But the booking shows piece is going to be one of these three things. You want to structure the pitch, don't use a one sheet, make it a custom pitch, and from there, make sure the pitch offer is actually related to what they need as a podcaster. You want to talk about the value you're going to bring, maybe offer to leave a review, talk about the exposure you can help them get by getting booked on the show. And all of this is made fantastically easier when you're part of a network effect like in Media Firestorm, where it's not just the value you're bringing in as an individual, it's the hundreds of clients and the value that we bring together, which allows us to attract these great quality shows. Now, that's step one in the booking process. You just need to have consistent high quality shows. We typically recommend that you want to have a minimum of 3,000 downloads on any of these shows. What we found is that this is the break point of where anything lower than that, and you start to notice that the quality drops, the consistency is not quite there. This is the break point of where we really see shows that start to have a lot more success and actually have high quality clients inside of their database. And so this is what we recommend for all of our Media Firestorm clients. You don't want to get on any shows that is less than 3,000 downloads, but we have a variety of shows that are significantly bigger than that, from 10,000 to 20,000 to lots of shows which have got 100, 200, 300,000 listeners a month and even more. And so what we would recommend, though, is that for you as a business owner, it's not worth your time to get onto shows that are any smaller than that. Now, the other thing that we talk about here is frequency. And we'll talk a bit more about the importance of consistency a little bit later in this video. And this is going to be really important when it comes to AI and really getting in front of those search results and just making sure that AI isn't telling people that you suck as a company because you're not feeding it enough data. But frequency of podcast bookings is a massively important part when you're making earned media a part of your 8-figure strategy. One of the really big things that we see a lot of businesses that get stuck in this sort of $100,000 to $200,000 a month range is that they have a core marketing message that converts well, and people who hear the message and it makes sense and are high risk profiles are going to move forward. But then there are a whole other chunk of customers who don't quite have as high of a risk profile. They need to see that message that you're sharing spread out in multiple different places, repeating the same thing. They're looking for congruency and consistency in that messaging. So when they see an ad and you make a promise, and then they go and see a podcast episode where you talk about it, a YouTube video that you talk about it, a website that says the same thing, social media that says the same thing, that congruency and consistency gives them enough confidence to be able to move through and operate. And if you speak to any 8-figure business owner, this is something that they would consider obvious and basic. But you'll find a lot of 7-figure business owners who are just one channel minded, which really slows them down in the long-term success. So when it comes to frequency of getting booked on shows, we typically recommend for most business owners, you want to try and do at least 1 to 2 hours a week of content. Now, some people I speak to, they're like, Jamie, 1 to 2 hours a week sounds like a lot of work. My brothers who are listening to this, 1 to 2 hours a week to promote your business is not a lot of time. You just have to carve out the time and make it a priority. And again, the beauty of a podcast interview isn't like a YouTube video where you have to sit down and prepare and write a script and record it multiple times. You just show up on a scheduled time, you do the interview, they usually take care of all the editing and making it look pretty. And a lot of time you can get that content to repurpose onto YouTube and other places afterwards. It's very, very time efficient compared to you just recording your time consistently. So first of all, make sure you're carving out time to market and do more marketing in your business. That's our motto for this channel. Do more marketing and make your marketing stronger. But at the same time, if you're finding that you've got 1 to 2 hours a week and you're struggling, then maybe I've got another video that I'll do for you in the future about CEO time and how we have to fix that constraint. So when it comes to booking shows, the biggest thing we're looking at here is we want to make sure that we've got the right pitch that hits on all the points. We want to make sure our pitch offer is actually getting people to come on board for what's in their benefit, not your benefit. Access to a network is just going to make this process significantly easier and probably something you can just delegate to a team member in an hour or two a week. And then on top of that, we want to make sure that we're consistently getting booked with these podcast exposures. If you do 1 to 2 shows a week, that's 100 podcast appearances that you'll have done by the end of the year. If you're getting on shows with a minimum of 3,000 downloads, that's 300,000 people that you'll have got that content out in front of before we even tie it back together with the rest of the marketing funnel and what we're doing. Now, the second thing I want to talk about the podcast funnel itself, and I want to talk about what is working the best in the market today. Now, first, what I really want you to understand here as a principle is that your podcast funnel should be designed, if you're doing 7 figures plus already, as an amplifier to your main funnel, not a standalone funnel. Let me just explain this in a bit more detail. There's a lot of people who come onto a call with me who are looking to book podcasts, and they're looking at it as a singular thing. I'm going to get on a podcast, I'm going to do an appearance, I'm going to get some traffic, and I'm going to get customers. How many customers can I get? And this one-track thinking is a terrible way to think about your podcast funnel. The goal here is not a single funnel. The goal here is an amplification to your existing call funnel. And the way that you want to think about this is, if I've already got Facebook ad funnels that are working and I've got my cost to acquire a customer and my return on that customer looking really solid. Your goal of a strong podcast funnel and any earned media should be to amplify the efforts to make that more efficient, to get you more leverage and to get you more stability so that you can spend more money on advertising to get a better return. Similarly, you might spend more money to actually amplify that earned media. Having a team to reproduce these YouTube episodes like we have, having a team to repurpose podcast interviews as regular podcast episodes, as blog posts, spending dollars to amplify the efforts of the earned media or the paid media. And so it's really important that you understand that 8-figure business owners who are using podcasts aren't using them as a standalone funnel. It's designed to amplify the existing efforts that they got outside of it. So the way you want to think about this is, number one, you want to take something that's already working, and that's going to be your core funnel. 2, you want to actually plug in all of the podcasting systems that we're going to talk about here and the podcasting systems that we deploy for all of our clients inside of Media Firestorm. And then 3rd, the goal here is to increase the effectiveness of that funnel. Because when you deploy this earned media and you get on these podcasts, yes, you're going to get traffic that's going to go through that funnel. Yes, you're going to get customers for free from these podcast experiences. But the people that leverage these podcast funnels in the best way are the ones that are using it to get more effectiveness out of their existing funnel. And we're going to talk a bit about that today. Now, what funnels are working the best if you do a podcast appearance? 1, if you've already got a core funnel that's working, drive them to that, right? If you're doing a webinar funnel, a video sales letter funnel, a direct to checkout funnel, just drive them to the thing that's already working inside of the funnels. But retrospective of that, the funnels that we're seeing performing the best in the podcast space right now are actually opt-in VSL funnels. Now, there is a debate in the marketing world. There's the difference between an opted-in VSL and a straight to VSL. A lot of marketers, when they run Facebook ads, find that when they drive people straight to a video sales letter without an opt-in, that they actually get better cost per purchases, better CACs, and that actually works a little bit better. What we found in the podcast space is just because of the type of viewer and the people that's going to be listening to podcast episodes, high consumption, typically higher value prospects, we actually do want to try and collect that information, that opt-in, so that we can remarket to them with some kind of daily email matrix, which we'll talk about in a second. So the best kind of funnel we're seeing for podcasting is just straight up, you have your video and you've got your headline and you've got the opt-in, and then on the second page, you've got your video sales letter. Now, we see anywhere from 8 to 20 minutes for these VSLs. There's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down just to talk about the effectiveness of video sales letters. But if you're selling in the B2B space, typically a shorter VSL is going to do a little bit better. If you're selling in the B2C space, longer ones might be a little bit better. We want to test that. So what we're looking for inside of this funnel is that we're typically looking for 30 to 50% opt-ins, and we're looking 3 to 10% conversions on the video sales letters. Now, 10% is pretty high. You're probably more likely to get a 3 to a 5% throughput on this, but we do see with podcast traffic that these funnels tend to get more bang for their buck, more throughput, and just overall a better consumption rate and a better throughput rate inside of this process. So step 1 in the funnel is going to be the opt-in to the VSL. The next step of the funnel is after they've actually looked at the VSL, the next thing they're going to do is go book on the calendar, right? And then the next thing they're going to get to is the standard confirmation page. Now, one of the best practices that you can really deploy here across all of your funnels and for podcast funnels specifically is to actually do what we call a frequently asked question confirmation page. Think of it this way: as they've gone through the VSL, their interest levels are raised. They're getting more interested. They've gone from maybe curious or kind of interested on the podcast. They're getting a little bit more interested. And what we want to do on that confirmation page is just really include a lot of the best practices that are going to help you get better results from the people that are coming through. Things on that page that we tend to include is things like breakout podcast clips. So you've actually got podcasts that you've done where you've got little 6-minute, 3-minute, 7-minute segments where you're addressing very specific questions, concerns, or ideas that your prospects might have as they're coming through this call process. And so what's really powerful about this is that you can actually just record a breakout video where you directly answer a question or a concern. But what we found is that when you include these breakout clips from a podcast conversation, the fact that there's another person in that clip, they're edifying you in the process, and it's coming across as an organic, natural conversation rather than a direct, straight-on video, we've seen that the consumption rate and the believability of that content that you're sharing is significantly higher inside of this process. And again, we don't have any specific metrics that I can share from this. Just overall, the metric we're looking at is conversion rate. When we use these breakout clips compared to breakout videos or no video at all, we're typically seeing a higher conversion rate, a higher show rate, which really leads us to think that this is one of the best practices you can have. So on this FAQ confirmation page, we want to answer these common questions that people are going to have in the sales process ahead of time. Your prospect, as they come through, is doing their due diligence, and they are going to do this due diligence with you, or they are going to do it without you. And so what we want to do in this sales process as much as possible is just give all of the context and all of the answers ahead of time. And what we want to do is try and give them in the best mediums we can. Everybody consumes media in a different way. Some people like video, some people like podcasts or audio, some people like written. And so what we typically want to do on that FAQ page is include one of each of these mediums. We've got the video right away, we've got the breakout podcast clips, and then we're also going to have written FAQ answers throughout that page. Again, answering common questions so that your prospects coming in can really get a lot of context coming into the call, and they're really going to be way more prepared. Now, the other aspect of this, after you've got your opt-in, your calendar, and your FAQ confirmation page that we've seen works amazingly both with podcast funnels and just regular call funnels, is actually making sure that before the call that we send them pre-sale emails. And so all these are just emails that you're going to send ahead of time, where the email itself is designed to be consumed. So a lot of people in emails traditionally, if you've got like an email that's going out before a sales call, it's going to be things like reminders. It's going to be things like where you're talking to people specifically about, hey, make sure you show up to this call. Some people even use language like homework, right? Which is super icky. Like giving a prospect homework before showing up the call, like that's going to work well, right? And so instead of all that crap, what you want to do instead is you really want to make sure that your prospect is consuming as much content as possible before they show up to this call. And so the best way that you can do this is actually to send these pre-sale emails out leading up to the call that the prospect has with you. And typically, you can send significantly more of these emails than you might realize. Right now in our current funnel that we're running, we're actually sending, believe it or not, between 3 to 5 of these emails in a 24-hour time horizon. I know some entrepreneurs that are in a fellow mastermind that I'm in that are sending as many as 6 emails per day leading up to the call. And so bear in mind, we're talking about a 72-hour time window here. You know, if you've got sales calls that are booking out for longer than 48 or 72 hours, you know, that's a problem within itself. But you're sometimes sending as many as 10 to 18 to nearly 20 emails to a prospect before they come on the call. Now, here's the really important thing that you need to understand. The goal of these pre-sale emails is to educate your prospect on what you're doing. You're typically going to have shorter 100 to 200 word emails, nothing kind of crazy, but things that are going to help your prospect make a strong buying decision. Talking about things like ROI, what kind of podcasts we're going to get you on, how our process works, how we attract podcasters, what to do if you don't get results, what happens if you can't get booked on shows. All of these common questions that people are going to have leading into the buying process, we want to answer this. And what you typically find is that this massively helps you have better show rates, and it also helps you have better close rates. And as you know, these two factors are going to lead to you having a better return on your ad spend in your marketing funnels. And so both having a strong podcast funnel and also using these elements in your traditional ad funnels is really just going to help you get a better return on marketing spend, so you can do more efforts to get more of this marketing out there. If this sounds like a lot, good. The point here is we're not talking about having a little funnel that's going to make you a couple of extra dollars at the end of every day. We're talking about something that's going to help propel you to building an 8-figure business and beyond here. And so adding these little layers are just these little 1% improvements that can help you do significantly better. Now, the final two pieces that we want to talk about here is the daily email matrix and the fire hose strategy. I'm going to talk about the daily email matrix first. So I don't know if you guys know this, but our average customer that receives emails from us, do you know how many emails they receive before they buy? On average, it's 127, which means that when we send daily emails, our average person that becomes a buyer doesn't buy for 4 months. Now, I want to be really clear here. We have a lot of customers that buy in the first 7 days. We also have a lot of customers that don't buy for 12 months. But what we do is that we make sure that we're sending them emails every single day to keep them engaged, to keep them top of mind, and to actually get them across the line. And so one of the biggest things that we do for all of our clients and also for ourselves is focus on email marketing every single day. And we follow the 80-20 rule here. And so it's 80% based on value or stories, and 20% is actually going to be a soft pitch. And so when I say value or stories, I really want to help you guys not mess this up here. Don't focus on writing emails based on value. You're going to very quickly run out of ideas. It's going to feel like an info dump. When it comes to your daily email matrix that's going to happen after people have booked calls or after people have opted in, your entire goal here should be story focused. Start writing emails with a story. If it transfers into some value, great. And at the end, you want to do a soft transition into a pitch where you talk about your offer and how you can help them, and really directing them back into the funnel to book a call. On a side note here, we've often found separate conversion mechanisms work great too. So if your main funnel is a video sales letter, having a separate funnel like a minimum viable calendar funnel, one of the other conversion assets that we get clients to use. I've got a whole separate video on minimum viable calendars if you want to, check that one out. But having a separate conversion funnel is a great way for you to also sweep up more customers in the emails that come later. Now, the process for this is very simple. Basically you're going to sit down at the beginning of every day and you're going to write an email. Now, these emails, they're typically going to take you 15 to 20 minutes to write. Maybe you sit down and you do these emails in a batch, once a week. But if you send these every day, as in one email per day, as in 7 emails a week and 31 emails in a month, you're just going to get significantly more return on your ad spend. You're going to get significantly more return on your podcasting efforts. And you're just going to make sure that you're not letting people drop off just because they're not ready to buy right away. Remember, only 3% of your prospects are actually ready to transact right out the gate. A lot of the rest of the people, they need some time, either because of situations or circumstances, or they're just not ready to buy yet. And so sending an email every day, making it story focused and staying top of mind is one of the best things you can do, because guess how much money these emails cost, right? It's basically free. If you've got 50,000 people on an email list, it might cost you $1,000 a month for the software, but you could easily pull anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 to $200,000 a month from that email list, basically making those costs negligible. This is the best source of marketing spend that you could have for your time, because it's so leveraged. One email is going to go out to your entire list, and this is a huge component of what we're seeing is best practices. And remember, all of these things stacking together, they're going to get you better show rates, they're going to get you better close rates, and typically you're going to get more calls that are getting booked in. And all of this is in your podcast funnel, and typically it's going to be going into your main marketing advertising funnel as well. And so all of these returns are just compounding, so you can aggressively gamble more money on your marketing efforts to get more customers coming through the front door. Now, the final thing, and I want to touch on this briefly, is something that we call the fire hose ad strategy. Now, I'm not a big ad guy. I don't run a lot of ads. We pay somebody to actually do all of our media buying. But I do want to bring your attention to this, because using a fire hose ad strategy is a massive extra tool in this tool belt. Shout out to Jeremy Haynes, who I learned this from. I'm in one of his masterminds. If you want to go into more detail with paid advertising, he's definitely the guy to look at when it comes to Facebook ads. And he calls this his hammer them strategy. We call it a fire hose ad strategy because we took his concept and we changed it ever so slightly. And so basically the process of this is that when you get people coming into the call funnel, what happens is once they book a call, you want to make sure for 7 days that you're sending them retargeting ads with a very high frequency, and your goal is to send them content to get them to make a buying decision. And so typically that content is going to be answering questions that prospects have, secondary questions, it's going to have objections, and also you're just going to have a shitload of proof that you're going to put in front of them to help them really move forward. And again, if you want to check this strategy out in incredible detail, just Google Hammer Them with Jeremy Haynes, and you can probably get a lot more context on this system and how it works. How we've adapted this for actually use in a podcast funnel is with the fire hose strategy, we're actually going to focus on a high volume of frequency, but mainly from a podcast content perspective. Again, because a lot of the time, these prospects they're coming in and they're looking to buy and they're ready to go. What we're looking to do is just to get them to consume a higher volume of this content. And by doing podcast content, which is often the medium that these people have found you from or they've experienced you in, you're actually going to find that by consuming more of that podcast content, they have a higher level of trust. And so we're going to do a mixture here of both long form podcast content and we're going to do a mixture of short form. Now, how I break this up is that we typically have 10 to 15 long form podcasts. And so these would be the 45-minute to the 60-minute podcast episodes that you're going to put out there. The short form, this would be typical shorts clips, right? So we're talking 15 seconds to maybe 2 minutes in length. And you're going to have about double the amount of those, right? You're going to have somewhere in the region of maybe 15 to 30 short form clips. But something we've actually noticed that works really well here is also what we would call the medium length, or we call these highlight clips. So for example, if you look at the Dave Ramsey show, they have a 4-hour, show that they do, and they pull out 8-minute highlighted clips where they're talking about a specific topic in detail. It's actually a lot shorter than a long form episode, but it's not as, high paced and fast strung as a short, which typically is just the value of that short is significantly less than the long form clip. Now, the reason that we look at it this way is that the long form content has the highest level of influence. The short form clips, you might get a lot of views, but the influence is significantly less than the long form clips. And so these highlight clips, like they pull out from the Dave Ramsey show, 6 to 8 minute, 3 to 8 minute clips, they give you a little bit more influence than the shorts while also making them something that's going to be consumable. So we do typically like to also have about 20 of these highlight clips that you can put into the mix here. And the good news is, because these are frequency-based ads that you're running, it's very low cost. You don't have to have a conversion campaign or anything crazy like that. You can just run a high frequency of these pieces of content for a 7-day window, because everybody that is booked in for a call here is going to have a high level of interest. And so actually, we call this the fire hose ad strategy. Is very powerful with the podcast piece. And that's the way that we would recommend that you guys deploy it. So to recap here, all the pieces of the podcast funnel, what we're seeing works best today, and definitely what I would recommend you guys are deploying if you're trying to scale to 8 figures, is using an opt-in VSL. And again, if you've got a core funnel that's working really well, just drive people to the same version of the funnel, but maybe separate it out so you can track what's coming in with podcast. You've got the opt-in VSL, you've got the FAQ best practices, you've got the breakout podcast clips, the video clips, and even the written form content on that FAQ page. On top of that, we've got a daily email cadence that's going to be going out after they come in and opt in and maybe haven't booked in a call. We've also got the pre-sell emails that are going to go out to people if they have booked in for a call. And on top of that, you've got the Firehose ad strategy, or the Hammer Them strategy from Jeremy Haynes, if you want to send them a lot of retargeting content to get the best bang of your result. That's everything that goes into the podcast funnel, but if you put all these pieces in place, the conversion typically is going to be massively more powerful. Now, the next thing I want to talk about here, and this is equally important, is I want to talk about the goal of the podcast content, because this is something that a lot of people really mess up with and get confused. So a lot of people, there's 2 ways that you look at the podcast content. The first is the core funnel. And so kind of like we just talked about, you appear on podcasts, you drive traffic into a funnel, you try and get people to convert, and a lot of people focus all their time and energy on the front end focus of the funnel. But there is actually a secondary funnel that exists, which I would argue is actually the biggest reason that people really benefit from podcasting in the long range. And we call this the shadow funnel. And the shadow funnel is basically everything that goes on in the background that isn't your core funnel. So when somebody hears you mentioned on a podcast episode and they go and Google your name, When somebody actually sees an ad from you and they go and check out your website to see what it's about before they click the ad. When somebody is booked in for a call with you and they then start to do their due diligence and research you saying, is Jamie Atkinson a scam? Is needaguest.com bullshit? Is Media Firestorm legit? They're going to Google these questions to do their due diligence. And what actually comes up in the search results, in the language learning models, in the ChatGPTs and the Groks and the Geminis of the world, that is what the shadow funnel is. And arguably, this should be your core goal of getting on podcast appearances and getting earned media out into the marketplace if you're already running a highly successful business, especially with paid media. Because it's this shadow funnel that's going to have the biggest impact on the hidden effect of your funnel. It's going to help you to have better click-through rates. It's going to help you to have better show rates, better close rates. And overall, it's just going to help you have a better brand message and become a lot more established. Because again, when people are looking to transact with you, unless they're a high risk profile and they're somebody that really just wants to execute and is willing to take a lot of risk, people are going to do their due diligence. They're going to look and they want to see, are you credible? Is this likely to happen? Has this worked for other people? Is it clear to you based on the content that this person is saying the same thing in multiple different places, which gives you confidence that they know what they're talking about? And so that congruency and the shadow funnel is a key part of what you want to be thinking about as you're scaling your podcast strategies and you're building your business to a higher level. Now, I did a whole separate video where I actually went through the changes that have come in from things like Google with their Gemini AI search and why it's super important. And I've actually done a whole separate video where I go into detail about the shadow funnel, all of the elements that you want to put in there, and how you can basically use podcast and earned media to help reprogram what the language learning models know about you and really just make sure that they're touting you as a respected business owner. Just making sure that they're promoting you as a solid solution rather than tearing you down as something that isn't going to work. But I want to cover this because I think it is really important. So the first part of the shadow funnel, top level, is that you've actually got your AI search. And this is what all the language learning models are finding out about you. And so remember, when you're looking at AI and you're looking at where the information is pulled from, they're typically going to be pulling from sources like Reddit. They're going to be pulling from sources like trusted sites. So this is the Facebooks, the Apple, the Spotify, the Medium, but as well as that, websites that have really high credibility. And this is why podcasting is such a powerful tool, because if you go onto somebody's podcast, they'll often have a website with a lot of domain authority and credibility where they're going to feature you, mention your name, you're going to get picked up in all of those searches. And those trusted sites have a really big impact on your results here. And you're also going to find that things like press and also blog posts are going to be sources of information for these language learning models to pull from. Now remember, these LLMs, they're very sensitive. They're going to pull in all of this information. And a lot of the time, they have a hard time distinguishing between what is legitimate and what isn't. And so they're going to factor in all of this information. And sometimes you can have information that's in there that isn't even relevant to you. For example, recently we had something coming up in our own search with Google Gemini that was pulling in about podcasting scams, where people would get on a podcast interview, someone would pull open a Facebook ad manager, and they would end up, changing some settings and taking control and ripping you off for $2,000 or $3,000. And we were having people making posts about that on Facebook, actually showing up in our overview when people were searching, is our company legitimate or not? And obviously that's got absolutely nothing to do with us as a company, but the AI overview was saying, I would issue caution with this because potentially this could be a scam based on what I found. And so this AI search is going to become a bigger issue. It's why I made a whole separate video on it. And this is one of the biggest things that you can influence in the shadow funnel, is by putting out a lot of the correct information about you, your company, and your process. You can feed the AIs with relevant information, which is going to make it much stronger. Now, the second thing is actually just search results in general. Good old-fashioned SEO. Now, SEO is not the sexiest thing in the world. A lot of people don't really like SEO. It's this big thing that takes a lot of time, energy, money, and effort to be able to get ranked in search results. But the thing that's really important to understand about podcast content is that these search results, this is what people are going to find when they're Googling and they're searching these obscure questions. When you've done lots of different podcast interviews and you've got your company name, your business name, and you answer all of these different questions in the headlines, in the descriptions, in the transcripts of those episodes, you're going to find that when people Google you, there's going to be a significant amount of content that's going to come up, which just shows you as being credible. Now, the third thing that's really important in the shadow funnel is just, again, as we talked about earlier, it's making sure that your content is consistent across the internet. If you're touting one message in your ads and your funnel, you want to make sure that that message is being repeated in all the places that people can find you on the internet. And so what's great about your podcast content you're putting out is that you can repurpose this. And so you'll find that you can do podcast interviews and put them onto your own YouTube channel, as well as the podcast YouTube channels. You can also do the highlight channels like we talked about earlier with the Dave Ramsey channel. You can also put them out onto podcasts. And again, I've often found that putting out the same exact content onto YouTube, a personal podcast channel, and then somebody else's podcast, you can actually have the same content in 3 different places and have 3 different audiences consuming it, because some people want to consume it on somebody else's show, some people will be listening to your show, and some people just prefer YouTube to audio in the way that they consume media. Remember that the typical person that listens to a podcast on YouTube is typically not the same kind of person that will listen to that same show in audio. People have preferences about how they consume that content. So you want to repurpose this in lots of places. Similarly, we'll often find that the transcripts from these podcast recordings, you can throw it into a language learning model, you can turn it into a blog summary, give it a little bit of an editing process, and you can put this content out as a blog post as well. And so typically when you're repurposing your content, if you have a team and you can deploy funds to do this, you can actually take 1 or 2 pillar pieces of content that you do every week and have a whole lot of efficiency distributing this to YouTube, highlighted clips on YouTube, other podcast episodes, blog posts, and even social posts. We've often seen people taking little clips from their podcast interviews and making it into a carousel Instagram post, a LinkedIn post, even Twitter posts. And if you've got funds to allocate to more marketing, you can spend 1 or 2 hours of your time producing this earned media and then have a team to distribute it, which just makes this process very efficient and helps you to have this consistency across the internet. So I hope you got a lot out of this video, guys. Just to recap, again, I think this should be required viewing for anybody that's trying to scale a podcast funnel to over 8 figures. Again, if you want some help with this stuff, please check out Media Firestorm down below. And the 4 things that I want you to walk away from this video is, 1, when you're actually going out and trying to scale using podcasts and earned media, the most important thing is to look at amplifying your existing marketing efforts so you can spend more money rather than having it as a standalone funnel. The goal should be to help your other marketing become more efficient and be able to get a better return on the spend. 2, the straight up benefit of doing podcast appearances or any earned media is that you're just going to be able to drive more of the right people directly to your offer, especially because these people tend to be highly valuable. Having consumed a lot of your content, they're typically much more likely to book a call and buy. 3, we want to be making a lot of content to give you a lot more credibility, sustainability, and trust in the marketplace, so that when people come and they see your content, that shadow funnel is really representing you and the brand across all of these different mediums. And again, the 4th piece here is that we want to make sure that all of this content is feeding these LLMs and these AIs and these search results, so that that shadow funnel is going to be doing that selling on the back end for you and supporting you after people Google you, ask ChatGPT if you're legitimate, and hopefully they're going to find more content to consume. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Like I said, if you want help getting booked on high quality podcasts, deploying some of these more advanced strategies in your business, or overall just helping you build out a more cohesive marketing system, click the link down below. We can chat to you about Media Firestorm and see if it's the right fit. If you like this video, please feel free to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. We're doing 2 videos every single week on a Tuesday and a Friday to give you guys as much value as possible. Remember, do more marketing. Make sure you're putting that effort in to grow the business, and we'll see you in the next episode.